I think the EU is getting all serious about trying to regulate Apple because they're jealous.
Yeah, trying to regulate the regulator.
They basically want the same things.
They're regulators.
Regular haters. Apple is trying to like control its user base, make all these rules about how their like users, their constituents, if you will, are, you know, can behave.
Allowed to live, allowed to act, allowed to interact with one another.
And you got the EU
trying to do the same thing.
Doing the same thing, except the users are citizens.
It's hypocrisy is what it is.
Yeah. Why can't they be like other governmental jurisdictions and just not make any laws at all?
Complete laissez-faire, just letting people drive on the sidewalks, download whatever they want, sideloading they call it.
Sideloading.
Sin, I say.
It's basically like running people down on the sidewalk if you sideloading an app. So think about that.
This was not condoned by God.
Yeah, that's right. We're here to talk about Apple and the EU and some of the most recent developments. Last week, because this is coming out on Monday, February 19th, last week Apple was let off the hook in regards to iMessage when it comes to...
Slap on the wrist.
The EU regulating them. Well, yeah, sort of. Because so the EU's Digital Markets Act... Mm-hmm. They're trying to kind of rein in all these tech giants who are, you know, operating willy-nilly, doing whatever the heck they want, closing down their ecosystems, behaving in a way that I don't antitrust. That was half-baked. And the iMessage was going to be, they were investigating. The EU was investigating whether iMessage should be one of these core platform providers and thus subject to more regulations.
Especially because it technically meets the legal definition. It's, what is it I wrote down? The legal definition is has at least 45 million EU users every month, and it's controlled by a firm with at least 75 billion euros in market capitalization. And iMessage fits those definitions. But... Apple specifically was arguing that it should be excluded for various reasons.
Right. Which, you know, and we heard, and I'll say that the development here is that, even though it fits that definition, the EU has made an explicit carve-out. Right. For not only iMessage, but they also made the same thing for
Bing, Edge browser, and Microsoft's ad services.
Right. And so we know, we published our TalkLinked about this last week, and we got a lot of comments from you guys talking about, specifically the ones of you that are in the EU, and you were like, we don't use iMessage. This is not a big deal. Mm-hmm. We're totally down with this because we all use WhatsApp instead. The other platform offered by a tech giant with near complete control over social media.
Which is itself actually considered a gatekeeper by the EU.
Right.
WhatsApp has been designated under the DMA.
As it should.
As it should.
Yeah. So the EU kind of has backed off on at least that aspect of it. Mm-hmm. And... you know, the EU people who live in Europe might be like, okay, it totally makes sense. Over here in North America, you know...
bit of a culture clash.
Definitely, because over here, a lot of people use iMessage. iPhones...
my entire family.
Yeah, I think that Android phones altogether still have more market share, but Apple is like Samsung and then Apple.
Yeah, it's up there.
I looked it up recently. I forgot what it was. But a ton of people use iPhones and iMessage over here, and... It was interesting. It's always interesting reading people who live in the EU posting online about how they're like, we don't understand why North Americans are so worked up over this whole green bubble thing. Like, it's just a bubble, you know, like.
Why does it matter? And I would agree with that to an extent. I do think we tend to get over obsessed with the green bubble because iMessage is interoperable to an extent.
Yeah, it just sucks.
You can message them. It's just you feel like a second-class citizen the entire time.
Yeah, and I'm sure to some people they do. I'm somebody who my friends and family, nearly all of them use iPhone.
Oh, I am the black sheep of the family group chat. 100%.
Yeah. Actually, two of my brothers I have 4 brothers. 2 of them are Android users.
That's important context. When you say two of my brothers, immediately like, is there like 12 Riley Murdochs wandering the countryside?
They are. It's a menace. Well, please be careful out there.
Just mustaches rustling in bushes.
They will laugh awkwardly all the time, just for no reason. Two of them are Android users, and basically every other person in my friends and family circle are iPhone users. So it is really annoying when I get I'll get messages, because it sucks for both parties. Mm-hmm. I'll get messages with a photo or video from my parents, and they're like, look at this. And they were babysitting my kid the other day, and they sent me like a video. Yeah. And I'm just like...
compressed, blurry. You're just like, I don't remember him being that pixelated when I dropped him off.
It looks like he's either having fun or being disemboweled by a stuffed animal. I don't know what's going on. So
you seem excited. I'll judge from context that he's not dead.
Yes, exactly.
No, it's designed to annoy both sides of the interaction.
Yeah.
It is designed to annoy the Android users, and we're the one who tend to fixate on it, but it's also intended to annoy iPhone users.
Right. Into not doing anything. Well, but that's what I'm confused about. Yeah. You want your own users annoyed with, but I think they're depending on iPhone users en masse, not really understanding the root cause of the issue.
No.
They don't understand that Apple could fix it. They think the problem is that, I'm texting this broke Android user
with their inferior device.
Yeah, why don't they just buy an iPhone?
And it's like, no, Tim Apple specifically in his giant tower of evil, he has been plotting to make it so that your grandkids' photos look like absolute messes.
Look upon your photo library and despair. Oh my gosh. May I just say that I found recently that some people have actually made compilations of me doing the Tim Cook impression, and it made me so happy. If whoever did, I think there's two big ones that are out there, maybe a third one. I don't want to make anyone angry. If you made those, I sincerely thank you.
They are fun.
They bring me joy. But yeah, this iMessage thing, it's got North Americans confused, and there was another thing that kind of came out last week about Apple and the EU and the regulations and whatnot, which was the Apple's attitude towards progressive web apps. Mm-hmm. Can you summarize exactly?
This is not something that is in the official build yet. This is in beta builds. And in the past 3, so with the first 2, they're like, oh, this might be a mistake. This might be a glitch.
Right.
Now that it's been 3 separate builds, Apple has not fixed this. This was previously functional. They're like, okay, this is probably intentional. This is probably Apple doing something intentionally, especially because it's happening at the same time as all of these other changes.
Right.
And it's that they are making progressive web apps non-functional in this build. So
they're breaking them.
They're breaking them. They're making them no longer act as apps that you can open from the home screen. Boop, there you go. And they're making them into, essentially they function now as shortcuts that just open a web browser. They just open the web page.
Which, to be fair, is essentially what progressive web apps are, right?
Yes. They are shortcuts.
They kind of they're shortcuts, but they kind of also some processing is done on the device and some is
It's
done.
the illicit love child of an app and a web page.
Right.
They have features of both. They do allow you to have local storage, which is no longer operable on iOS. They do allow notifications, which is no longer operable on iOS.
Yeah.
And the big thing is about progressive web apps. I don't actually see a huge user backlash to this.
Yeah. Well, and
because this is mostly something that the brands themselves really like.
Yeah. So I was doing. I have, in the years that I've been covering tech news, I've encountered the idea of progressive web apps, obviously, and I've seen them.
Yeah, because they support caring for the homeless, and they want health care.
Progressive web apps.
And also, they're really convenient. They open straight from the homepage.
They're web apps that push for change. No, yeah. So there's sort of there's sort of changes to the app design that allows it to kind of like, launch more responsively and be a bit easier to use in the way that an app is, like an actually installed app. But it's basically a website still.
Yes.
Because it is, you're going through a browser. And
it's an Uber web page that operates like the Uber app.
Yeah. Looking these up a little bit just a few minutes ago, because I asked myself, I'm like, why do these exist? Who wanted these? Does this really make life better for users or for like business owners? And it seems like the people who really wanted these were business owners. I don't want to speak for anyone. If you're, on the user side of this and you're like, I love progressive web apps. Every time I, go on my browser and look up
we don't
a
mean
website,
to invalidate your lived experience.
Yeah, I go on a website and it tells me maybe you want to switch to the web app or whatever, and you do that and you're very happy. Then fair enough. But for me, every time that it gave me that prompt on my phone, I'm like, no, just go to the website, please.
Stop.
Yeah. And so
we are old men, so
yeah.
We don't like this newfangled business.
As far as I can tell, the reason web apps really became a thing is because they allow businesses to kind of farm more interaction and engagement from users when they go to a website. So apparently
they decrease the friction of getting the consumer on the app, engaging with the material, buying the goods.
Yeah, and so apparently Pinterest, a 2018 review published by Forbes, this is just on Wikipedia, found that users of Pinterest's progressive web app spent 40% more time on the site compared to the previous mobile website. Revenue increased by 44%, core engagements by 60%. So I'm like, okay, I understand, because a progressive web app is a bit easier to use than like a lot of mobile sites.
Experience.
Right.
It has less friction, less of those petty annoyances that make you go, oh yeah, I should really go make something to eat. I should really go clean the house.
Right.
It's easier to just suck you in.
I guess the benefit though for users is that you can
they
have
spend
an
less
app,
time with their kids. And more time sucked into a screen.
and anything that can get you away.
Just that little bit of a dopamine hit to take away the nigh unstopping pain of existence.
And Apple doesn't want that because they want your families to remain intact.
Absolutely.
And buy more Apple products.
This is a Tim Cook conspiracy to maintain the traditional family.
I'm not going to do another impression. The bait didn't work.
We get so excited on the writing team every time Tim Cook makes an announcement.
I'm like, yes, he's back.
Yes.
But the benefit for the users is the fact that you can have like an app-like experience outside of the distribution channel that is the Apple App Store or Google Play. Mm-hmm. So businesses can deliver this sort of experience to users without jumping through all those hoops.
Without necessarily having to use those stores as an intermediary.
Right, and that's why Apple wasn't really a fan of it to begin with.
Apple was never a fan of it. They caved a bit to pressure.
Yeah.
And it looks like they're uncaving. Looks like they're digging out that cave.
Oh, wait, really? I thought
this.
Well, they're killing them, right?
Yes, but they didn't want to put them in the first place.
Oh, they caved to the pressure to allow... Right.
And now they're uncaving.
Yeah, I get what you're saying. The cave, I don't do well with cave analogies.
They're decaving.
Right. And like caving is not... It's something that is not excavating a cave. It just means going inside a cave.
Spelunking.
Oh, there's that. Wait, what is caving?
I'm honestly... Well, I mean... I don't know if there's multiple definitions of the word cave. I know that
caving, also known as spelunking.
Yep.
And potholing. So
I have never heard of that before.
They're just making them up at this point.
That sounds dirty.
Now, does this have anything to do with the EU thing, really? Because Apple was forced to open up iOS to third-party app stores, sort of, we'll get into that. Because they were forced to do that, now they're like, well, I guess we don't need progressive web apps, which was the previous method to kind of like skirt the app store. Now you're going to have your very own third-party app store instead of the Apple App Store on your iPhones. So you don't need progressive web apps anymore. So they're only killing.
Are you happy now, developers?
Yeah.
Stop crying.
So they're only killing it in the European Union.
Yes, it's exclusive to the EU, and that's another hint. Is like, okay, you're doing this intentionally. It's exclusively in the EU. Is this a response to the other things going on in the EU? Because Apple does do these things to keep regulators happy, and if it's making a concession in another area, maybe we don't have to make this concession anymore.
And of course, as their official explanation, Apple has to claim that malicious web apps could read data from other web apps and gain access to a user's camera, microphone, and location without user consent. And like,
think of the user.
When they said similar things
For
like this.
Shame. User.
They said similar. They did scary language like this as well when they released their like new rules for the App Store in the EU. But like those things are true.
Yes, they are.
Of any platform if malware gets it. So it's like the maybe we should talk about this when we as we talk about the other regulations, but just quickly, anytime Apple talks about security as a reason for why they need to lock things down, it always reads so hollow because every other platform allows these things and is able to have reasonable security, reasonable protections.
Safety.
But Apple is the only massive company, overseeing one of these massive platforms used by so many people, who insists that they have to have things locked down so
Mother
tight.
knows best.
Yeah.
It's very paternalistic.
It is.
And it's one of those competing values kind of things where it's like, well, you want these services to be safe, right? And I do. But I
do
very much do. But the question is not should this be safe, is are you balancing this correctly with other concerns? And largely, it is almost always the case that Apple is pushing always like 10% too far.
Yeah.
It's 10% too far.
And it's interesting because even when they do kind of open up, they open up in the most limited way possible, which
like a reluctant child who's been told to apologize, dragging their feet and saying, "I'm sorry." Well,
but it's worse than that because they're not acting petulant or like a kid so
they're
much as they're acting like a dictator that was just forced to respect human rights. They're like, okay, I guess we will allow people. But
just so you know, this is letting the communists win.
Yeah. But just so you know, if we let people out of their cells, they could punch each other. So on the street. So everyone needs to stay. That's why we need a curfew.
Ha! This video doesn't have quick bits, but if it did, they'd be brought to you by Volcanica Coffee. Pair your tech news with a nice cup of joe. Volcanica Coffee sources their beans from the finest crops in the best volcanic regions from around the world, where the soil is rich, not with rocks, but minerals, Marie. Their exotic high-quality coffee has distinctly different flavors and nuances to tantalize your taste buds. If you like good coffee, or you know someone who does, check out Volcanica Coffee at the link below and use code Linus15 for 15% off your order.
So that brings me to the App Store rules that Apple instituted because they were forced to, because there was a deadline, or the deadline is coming up. We haven't hit the deadline yet, but they know that they have to get these rules out, and then there's a review process, and the EU has to approve them and all that stuff. And I don't think anything has really moved forward on that. But if I'm not mistaken, the deadline is...
It's coming up?
March 6th, I believe. So yeah, Apple is now allowing third-party app marketplaces, what they call.
Well, they do have the bit of the Kleenex problem where their word for an app store became the default word for an app store.
Yeah, and I guess they were really the first big one.
Yeah,
they called them apps.
The Play Store is also an app store. Not
only so they're saying we're allowing you to have these third-party app stores. However, every app that goes on the app marketplace that is not ours,
notarized like a wedding.
We still have to scan it. We still have to make sure that it's cool, which is, somewhat fair on Mac OS and on Windows. you can install any app you want, and the system security will scan the app when it's installed, and or it'll check it against a list of currently known, malicious apps or whatever, and it'll give you a warning or like whatever. But Apple's saying that in order for you to publish an app on this other app store at all, they need to notarize it.
For you to even consider downloading it, it must pass through a test.
Which is just, and this is, it's just so Apple. If you want to launch an alternate app marketplace, you need to have a letter of credit from an A-rated financial institution and at least €1 million in the bank. Which I heard some developers say is actually kind of reasonable.
It does mean that they have a backstop in case something terrible happens.
Yeah.
Which you do want for a company that's dealing with very large amounts of refunds, potentially.
Right. But what they're definitely not allowing is, so like there's some progress here. They're definitely not allowing side loading.
No.
Like
people keep saying that.
But
I've seen articles published in the last week that are saying that Apple is allowing side loading.
Really?
And as far as I can tell, they are not.
I saw a bunch of initial articles talking about it, but it's so annoying because you have some people who I think view side loading as just
anything that isn't the App Store.
Yeah, which is like, well,
words have meanings.
Yeah, side loading should mean going to a website or something, or downloading a file, an APK file, or I forget what they're called, a package file on, I don't know what it is on iOS, and then double clicking that file to install it. And you're not getting it through an app store at all. To me, that's side loading. But, fair enough. Apple people, they're in their own world sometimes.
It's like you're calling her your side chick and she's just your wife. Like,
I will say that every time I talk about Apple, I get self-conscious about whether like Apple people listening to this, people who are Apple fans listening to this, think that I like absolutely just hate Apple, and I don't at all. I think that they
every day he walks into the office and he just punches a picture of Tim Cook. He's just got on a dartboard. He doesn't even throw the darts. He just
I will defeat you and take your place.
That's what he's been practicing for.
Yeah, Barbara, come on.
Tim Cook's skin suit.
No, I love Apple. I used to be an Apple user before I got hired at NCIX and like just fully got brainwashed into PC ecosystem. My wife uses Apple. Everyone, like a lot of people I know, use Apple, and I'm like, it's good for you. It's good for a certain type of people.
They are very high quality products.
The UI is simple. The design is slick, and they're easy to use, and they're secure. They are. For better or worse, the measures that Apple takes does help these people. These poor people who don't know how to use a phone unless Apple tells them how to. See, I did it again.
It's compulsive.
I can't be fully positive. So you got some notes here. Commissions paid to Apple have been reduced to 10% for most devs and for subscriptions after the first year. And then there's a 17% commission for digital goods and services. And that is if developers choose to adopt the new business terms.
Yes.
You can stay on the old business terms where it's like 30% or 15%, depending on what your position is in the developer marketplace, how popular you are, et cetera, how much revenue you're getting.
Et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah. But here's the kicker. See, if just from that, it sounds like...
Sounds awesome.
It sounds like you should move. But they also introduced, so add on to that potential 17%, the 3% fee if you still want to use Apple's payment processing. If you want to use an alternative payment processing, you can drop that 3% fee. But Apple also introduced an additional core technology fee of €0.50 for each annual install per user after the app crosses a 1 million install threshold. And I am almost positive that they make this so hard to understand on purpose.
Yeah, like if math was your least favorite subject in school, this is meant to trick you.
Yeah, for sure.
Because it doesn't sound like a lot, but it's super complicated to understand, to like really grok what's going on here.
Yeah, and it took me a while to wrap my head around it. But so essentially, the first time a user goes to install an app on their device, if they've never installed this app before, when they install it, the developer will pay €0.50. then that user can install that app anywhere they want on other devices, and the developer won't be charged for 12 months. 12 months after the day that the user installs the app for the first time. Then if they uninstall it and reinstall it or install it on another device, then the developer will be pinged again.
Ding.
Yeah, dinged, not pinged. They won't get a little message reminding them to reply to an email or something. And that happens for every user after the app has been installed 1 million times.
So if you've got 2 million, that's €500,000 in fees.
Yes. So, and they have a handy calculator so developers can go and see how much they might lose.
To see how absolutely ruined they're going to be.
And most developers, it seems, if you have an app that's popular in any way.
To any degree.
If you have over 1 million installs.
Particularly if you do not have in-app purchases. Like if you, because I was thinking about my favorite game back in the day, which was Plants vs. Zombies, the first one before they ruined it. And in that game, I only paid for that game once.
Yeah.
But I like to download it every few years to play it again. I would be financially...
Well, the developer would.
I would be punishing them.
Yes.
They would be getting punished for my love. My affection and my nostalgia for this game, and the fact that they're not pushy with in-app purchases, that it's not a live service game that's constantly trying to suck the life out of you, that would actually be penalized. By this kind of game, but this kind of payment structure.
And Apple has said that they are like, we're gonna protect against people
maliciously doing.
Yeah, people taking advantage of the system if they want to
But you can also
cancel
just
developers.
Unmaliciously be severely punished by this, and that's actually far more likely.
I think it was such whiplash. Oh, and one more thing, that core technology fee of €0.50, it applies to alternate app marketplaces for every install. They don't need to wait.
They are not protected by the 1 million install threshold.
Yeah, so you don't have to wait for an app marketplace to be installed 1 million times. Now, all of these numbers, does it only have to be installed 1 million times in the EU?
Presumably.
I feel like that's true.
Presumably.
Yeah, it must be.
It'd be weird if it wasn't. It'd be weird if you had 1 million installs in I don't know, Tajikistan.
Yeah.
And you had one install over that limit in the EU, and suddenly you owed Apple $1.
Yeah. So there's sort of...
That's unintuitive.
There's sort of you can see Apple's side here a little bit, because as we've said, EU people say again and again how not popular iPhones are and iMessages in Europe.
Although iPhone is more popular than iMessage.
That's true. A lot of people will still have iPhones.
WhatsApp on it.
Yeah, for
and
sure.
WhatsApp gets dinged.
But yeah, this came out, and the news came out, and it seemed like, oh my gosh, the EU got Apple. They we've been forcing. They basically forced them to put USB-C in the iPhone.
Yes.
Apple finally caved to that, I think, before they really had to, but they made it clear, I think, at some point. I remember a press release
it was inevitable.
About how they were like, this is worse, but we're doing it anyway, I guess.
For you.
Even though the connector's better than Lightning, whatever.
I don't know if it's a factual thing. I always felt that the Lightning connectors wore out faster.
The actual connector themselves are pretty robust.
But
I found the cables fraying.
The cables fray like anything else, nothing else.
Yeah.
Or maybe that's because I was jumping a rope with them.
That'll do it. Apple, I got whiplash when we reported on this. It was like, wow, the EU got Apple, and then the more you read into it, you're more like, oh, this is why people called it malicious compliance. However, one other thing that came out at the same time was Apple announced that globally, gaming apps, cloud gaming apps, can now list all of their library and have their library of games accessible from within the iOS app on the App Store, which was not allowed before.
You had to list them all individually.
Well, that's what Apple wanted them to do, like Xbox
Resident Evil 1, Resident Evil 2, Resident Evil 3,
and
Code Veronica.
Xbox, basically said, yeah, no, we're not doing that. And then they just, had the web app, basically. You could go to geforcenow.com or Xbox Game Pass or whatever, and you could like use the browser to stream games, but it's not a great solution. So that at least they kind of like, that's the one thing that they unequivocally like gave ground on, but the rest of it, it remains to be seen how the whole Apple versus the EU situation will continue to play out here. Where do you see things going from here? Do you see the EU kind of calling Apple out on this and being like, no, this is not good enough? Or are they going to do like a similar thing that they did with iMessage, because they know that iMessage like qualifies, but it's only their jurisdiction in Europe. It makes kind of sense. So do you think that they're going to... It has a lot
to do with just how we're defining what a market is. If we're only defining it as the EU and we're only defining it as... A lot of antitrust is like that, and it can be quite frustrating because it feels like, principally you should be doing it this way, but no, it is done by rule. It is done by these esoteric, very specific principles that we have been using legally as jurisprudence for hundreds of years, and they don't really make a lot of sense unless you're very immersed in them.
Yeah, I mean,
but I do think that Apple's going to get significantly more pushback for what they've been doing with the App Store than they will for, I do not think it's going to go. Maybe they're not going, maybe regulators are not going to push them that hard, but I cannot imagine they'll just give them a complete carve out and accept these new rules.
Yeah, they're ridiculous because
they
you basically
seem
have
actively worse than the rules they were forced to change.
Developers basically have a choice between sticking with Apple's old rules, which are the proper right rules that you should follow, or switching to this new system because they really, really, really want to launch third-party, like their apps on the third-party app store, or like Epic, they want to launch their own third-party app store. But by doing that, they're getting so much worse of a deal.
A hefty financial penalty.
And basically the only people, Epic has said we're going to launch Fortnite on iOS through the Epic Game Store when we launch that as a new app marketplace, when we're later this year. But, like the Epic Game Store, it promises to be an exercise in losing money because they're still going to be paying Apple crazy amounts of fees if they do this. I half expect them to just say like, you know what, we're still not going to do it because I feel like they wanted to take this win, quote unquote. They wanted to revel a little bit in Apple being forced to allow third-party app stores by saying, haha, we are going to launch our app store, because they just weren't allowed to do that at all before. Now they can do it, but it's going to be like, at what cost? At a big one.
But the thing is, we're not the only ones who are aware of this. Regulators are likely to be aware that, offering someone a choice that technically exists, but is effectively the exact same choice as before. It's just previously I said you could go by my rules, and now you have the option of going by my rules or stepping into this bear trap.
Yeah.
I cannot imagine that will fly.
Yeah. And then there's the whole question of whether the EU should be attempting to regulate these companies in this way, because so far it seems like the EU has kind of put through regulations that, at least to us in the tech sphere, we don't, obviously we aren't really involved in keeping up with European regulations in non-tech
speak for yourself.
Sure, yeah.
Potholes.
And we can't talk about it now, even if we are caught up with it. But with other areas of politics, we're not going to delve into the EU is regulating, healthcare or all these things, right? We
should there be a tariff on Brussels sprouts?
Yeah, exactly. We're talking about tech stuff, and as far as that, we like what the EU has done so far broadly. But the question becomes, when do they stop? At what point will the EU say, all right, that's enough regulation now? The market is sufficiently de-freedomized a little bit so that it's a bit more fair. But I hope that they stop at the right point instead of just continuing to impose more and more regulations on companies, such that, because sometimes you can foster innovation. Other times you can stifle innovation with regulation. So I don't know. I don't live in Europe. We live in Canada.
Which is essentially the Europe of North America.
I think you offended a lot of Europeans there.
And I'm glad.
Primarily because it's a country and not... okay, well, let me say goodbye to the Europeans in their own language. Thank you for watching, guys. Don't forget to subscribe to TalkLinked.
A bientôt.
See you. Okay.
Auf Wiedersehen.
That might be too offensive to include in the video.
Ciao.
But I'm not going to do an alternative, so we're forced to use it.